It all began on one of those deceptively peaceful Saturday mornings, the kind where you expect nothing more than a smooth ride and a clear mind. The air was crisp, the sun hit just right, and I was ready to take my Ducati out for a spin down the coast. I had just finished polishing every curve of that red beauty until it gleamed like molten fire under the daylight. I parked it in my driveway for a moment, stepped back, and admired the reflection of the sky across its panel. Everything about that morning screamed perfect, but perfection doesn't last long when chaos is waiting around the corner. Out of nowhere, a voice shattered the calm, a high-pitched, grating tone that sliced through the peaceful hum of the neighborhood. I turned, and there she was, the HOA president's daughter, marching across my yard like she was on a mission from royalty. Her expression was a cocktail of arrogance and entitlement, the kind of look that said she'd never heard the word no in her life. She jabbed a manicured finger toward my Ducati and said, with complete seriousness, "Give me your bike." I actually laughed. For a second, I thought it had to be some kind of joke, but her glare told me otherwise. "It's just sitting there," she insisted. "You're not even using it." "I'll bring it back later." I blinked, speechless. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. Before I could respond, she whipped out her phone, announcing she was calling the police. Her thumbs flew across the screen like she was reporting a felony. And within minutes, the distant wail of sirens began to echo down the street. I stood there, jaw clenched, trying to keep my cool. This wasn't about a motorcycle anymore. It was about power, entitlement, and how far someone would go to prove they could control others. When the squad car finally pulled up, the scene looked almost absurd. I stood beside my Ducati, calm and collected, while she gestured wildly, accusing me of hoarding what she claimed should be hers. The officers looked from her to me, unsure what to make of it. I calmly explained the situation, pointing out that the bike was mine, registered, insured, and paid for with my own hard work. But she wasn't having it. Her voice rose higher and higher until she was practically ordering the officers to confiscate my motorcycle. My patience was wearing thin. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my card, and handed it to the lead officer. "You might want to note," I said evenly, "I've already spoken with the state attorney regarding ongoing harassment in this neighborhood." The color drained from her face. The officers stiffened slightly, exchanging a glance that told me they now understood this wasn't some petty neighbor dispute. The air around us shifted instantly, but her shock didn't last long. It quickly twisted into anger, pure, unfiltered rage. Her voice trembled as she accused me of intimidation, claiming I had threatened her by simply standing on my own property. I almost laughed at the absurdity. The officers tried to calm her down, suggesting she take a step back, but she refused. "He can't just keep this here," she shouted. "It's mine. He's lying." That was it, the breaking point for my patience. I maintained my composure, but the disbelief was written all over my face. Did she genuinely think the police would just hand over my Ducati because she demanded it? Reality was about to hit her like a brick wall. I showed the officers my documentation, title, registration, proof of insurance, all neatly stored in my phone. They checked each detail carefully, nodding in quiet acknowledgement. The truth was undeniable. Still, she refused to back down. In one final act of desperation, she called her father, the infamous HOA president himself. I could already see the drama deepening by the second. When he arrived, his expression was a mix of irritation and confusion. His daughter ran to him, voice trembling with exaggerated distress. I braced myself for the usual HOA arrogance, the lecture about community rules or property standards, but what I got instead was something better. I met his gaze squarely and explained everything. Her demands, her false accusations, the unnecessary call to the police, and my previous communication with the state attorney's office about neighborhood misconduct. The shift in his demeanor was immediate. His confident stance faltered. The man who once dictated the rules of the entire neighborhood suddenly looked powerless. Meanwhile, neighbors had started gathering, some peering through windows, others standing on porches, phones in hand, recording the spectacle. My Ducati, glinting under the sun, stood like a trophy in the middle of the chaos. Every word I spoke was deliberate. Every calm gesture drove the point home. I wasn't the one who should be afraid here. The HOA president's daughter, now trembling and red-faced, realized her mistake. But instead of backing down gracefully, she tried one last desperate move, something that would turn the morning's insanity into a full-blown neighborhood showdown. She threatened to bring in more authorities, tossing around words like legal retaliation, as if that would scare me into submission. I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled. I had already predicted every move she might make. Watching her crumble under her own false sense of power was almost poetic. That's when it hit me. People like her only thrive when others cave to fear or pressure. Take that away and they lose all control. The game had shifted. I wasn't defending a motorcycle anymore. I was drawing a line in the sand. Entitlement had limits, and I was the one enforcing them. The driveway incident left its mark on the neighborhood. I thought the storm had passed, but a week later, the next wave rolled in. An official notice arrived in my mailbox, an HOA complaint filed by none other than the president's daughter herself. The letter was dripping with arrogance, accusing me of reckless behavior, creating a safety hazard, and of all things, intimidating her family. I couldn't help but laugh as I read it aloud. But behind that laughter was resolve. This wasn't just another tantrum. She was trying to weaponize the HOA's bureaucracy against me. When the day of the hearing arrived, I walked into the meeting room ready for battle. It was packed. Neighbors lined the back wall, whispering and waiting for drama. At the front sat the daughter, arms crossed, eyes full of smug satisfaction, her father beside her radiating that same self-righteous confidence. They thought their titles and influence could bend reality. They were wrong. When it was my turn to speak, I laid everything out with calm precision, my registration papers, insurance documents, photos, and a detailed record of the harassment I'd endured. I even included a timeline of every incident, supported by witnesses. Each fact landed like a hammer. Every exaggerated claim she'd made fell apart under scrutiny. I could see the discomfort ripple through the board members. Their polite nods turned into uneasy glances as the evidence piled up. Then I dropped the final piece. I informed them that I had already spoken with the state attorney's office about repeated HOA harassment and that false claims or intimidation could have legal consequences. The shift in the room was instant. The daughter's confidence cracked. Her father's smug grin disappeared. A thick silence settled, broken only by hushed whispers from the back of the room. The once powerful HOA duo suddenly looked cornered, stripped of the authority they had long taken for granted. She tried to salvage her dignity, blaming me for creating tension in the community. I met her gaze and replied calmly, "The only tension here came from threats and lies." The truth hit harder than any insult could. By the time the board made its decision, the verdict was crystal clear. My Ducati was fully protected under HOA policy, her complaint dismissed, and any further harassment would lead to legal action. The look on her face as the ruling was read aloud? Priceless. I walked out of that room feeling equal parts relief and triumph. The daughter had just learned that arrogance without knowledge is self-destruction waiting to happen. My Ducati wasn't just a bike anymore. It had become a symbol of standing tall when others try to break you down. But the story didn't end there. A few days later, I spotted her pacing in her front yard, phone pressed to her ear, muttering about next steps and making him pay. It was clear she hadn't learned her lesson. This wasn't about property anymore, it was personal. And she was about to make her biggest mistake yet. I decided to prepare. The Ducati stayed parked where everyone could see it, visible, safe, and almost taunting her to try again. And sure enough, that evening she returned. She didn't come alone this time. With her were a couple of friends and a neighbor or two, an audience for her next attempt at humiliation. She strutted up my driveway like she was leading a crusade, wearing that same smug smile she'd worn the first day this chaos began. "Looking for something?" I asked casually, nodding toward the Ducati. Her jaw tightened. She had expected me to be defensive, maybe even scared. Instead, I stood there calm and composed, a wall she couldn't intimidate. Her anger boiled over. Without warning, she reached for the bike's handlebars as if grabbing it would somehow make it hers. I stepped forward, not aggressive but firm. "Back off," I said evenly. "This is my property, again." Her face twisted in fury. "You can't stop me." "I'll call the cops," she shouted. "Go ahead," I said, reaching into my pocket, not for my phone but for my card. The one with my direct contact to the state attorney's office. I held it up just long enough for her to see it. That single gesture shut her down completely. Her friends exchanged nervous glances. The tension that had filled the air moments earlier dissolved into awkward silence. Around us, neighbors peeked from behind windows and fences, whispering as they recorded with their phones. Everyone knew she'd just lost, again. By the time her father arrived, his tone had changed entirely. Gone was the authoritative arrogance. In its place was cautious restraint. He spoke softly, trying to find a resolution. But the truth was, there was nothing left to negotiate. I laid out the facts one last time, my legal rights, my evidence, and the consequences of further harassment. It was over. Completely, irreversibly over. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she retreated with her entourage, muttering empty threats no one believed anymore. The Ducati stood gleaming under the fading light, untouchable, spotless, and victorious. That day I realized something powerful. Standing firm and knowing your rights isn't just about defending what's yours, it's about demanding respect when others refuse to give it. Calm confidence beats bluster every time. From then on, the story spread like wildfire across the neighborhood. Everyone knew what had happened. The HOA president's daughter, once feared and obeyed, had finally met her match. And me? I didn't just keep my Ducati. I earned something much better, the last laugh. So the next time someone tries to bully you or abuse their power, remember this. Knowledge, patience, and quiet strength will always outshine arrogance. And if you thought this HOA Karen saga was wild, just wait for the next one. Smash that like button if you enjoy seeing justice served, drop a comment with what you'd have done in my place, and don't forget to subscribe because this neighborhood drama, it's far from over.